All right, so for another episode of How to Set Up a Grid, this is episode 4, and we're going to go ahead and set up a region. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close down Wi-Fi real quick because I need to copy that folder, and I don't believe it'll work while it's in use. So let's go to Tutorials, and I'm going to just take this bin file, and I'm going to click Copy, and go back to the upper level folder here, and I'm going to make a new folder, and we're going to call it Welcome Center. Welcome Center, because this is going to be our first region and it's going to be our welcome center. So what we'll do is we'll paste the bin in there because that's all we really need to run a region. Everything else is just kind of there. So let's restart Robust because we need that running to connect to anyways. So that's going to do its thing. Now under bin, this is going to be probably broken down into 2 episodes because you have quite a bit of things to set up here for your Opensim instance. But nonetheless, it's still easy, and if you follow these instructions, you should have no problem. So first up, let's go under Config, Include, and you're going to find a note card called Grid Common ini.example. You need to, if you're using Hypergrid, and that's what this tutorial is all about, is a hypergrid setup, you need to use this one. If not, you have to use whichever ini pertains to your setup. Okay, but this one is going to use gridcommon.ini.example, which we're going to rename to gridcommons.ini. Okay, so we're going to change that file extension. Now we're going to open that up. So in here, it's set to use SQLite, which is okay, but we use MySQL, so might as well continue using MySQL. So we're going to go ahead and comment this out because we don't need that. And to make MySQL work, we have to uncomment these 2 lines here. Okay. Now again, you could change this to Diva Data MySQL DLL, but we'll do that later. If it's up to you, it doesn't matter. Okay. So here you'll define your database info. So we're going to make a new database. We're going to use the robust database for robust. Just leave it alone. Now we'll create a new one, and we're going to call it Welcome Center. Okay, with the ID of your grid, and the same password to connect would be your grid. Now, just to be sure we have Welcome Center added, we need to create that database. So let's go ahead and go Welcome Center, and then click OK. So that's created. Alright, now we're going to continue on. You need to uncomment this line here and this line here. That'll allow for hypergrid connectivity. And continue on. A lot of this is already set for you. You don't have to touch it. Now here is if you want to restrict outbound permissions. So say you have stuff on your grid and somebody comes in with the hypergrid and it's set for sale and they grab a copy. This here and they take it back to their grid. Well, normally you could do that, but this will restrict it. So anything on your sim is staying on your regions, on your server. They cannot export the content off of your grid if this is set to false, which is great for content creator. Like it says here, if you have licensed content and you want to protect it, set this to false. Okay, but the default is true. So we'll just leave it the way it is. Now here, if you want to restrict your inventory access abroad, say so somebody goes to the hypergrid and they have a folder called a My Suitcase, okay? That stores all the items that you receive and get and give in the inventory in the hypergrid. But if you click this to true or type this to true, then people can access their local inventory abroad. And I don't recommend that because unless you want people to be running off with people's creations, I would leave that set to true. Okay? And now we're going to continue on. Alright, that looks like that's the end of that one for this. So we'll go ahead and save that. Just double check real quick. Make sure I didn't forget nothing here. Alright, I think we are good with that. That one's the easy one. Okay, so the next set is we're going to do the opensim.ini, which is located under tutorial, welcome center, bin, and now that's going to be here called opensim.ini. So we're just going to go ahead and open that one. Alright, we still have a few minutes left here, so we'll continue on. Alright, as before in Robust, you need to define the URL, the base URL. So that will be tutorial.skylifegrid.com. And we're going to put 5005. And this one will become 5006. Alright, so continuing on. Here you can set all the default stuff for your region. I don't ever touch this stuff because if you start changing these, you could have some negative effects on your grid. Right, so this is where you would set for allow script crossing. If it's all set to true. This here, if you're running mega regions and you have them all connected together, you want to combine them into one, you would uncomment this and set it to true. And that will combine all contiguous regions or contained regions that are connected together into one giant region. Continuing on. This is where you would choose your physics engine. Default is Opensim. I don't recommend changing that unless you really know what you're doing. Alright, the map here is, later on we're going to implement 3D map tiles. Right now it's using really junky looking black texture rendering for map. So it really looks, it doesn't give justice to your region. So later we'll go over how to install warp tile 3D map tiles, and I'll give you the bit of code that you need to place anywhere in this section. But continuing on. Okay, here is an important section. I always set allow grid gods to true because then you can define a user 200 and they can become god if they like. So true. Now that allows for grid gods. Now here you do not want a region owner to be god because anybody that becomes a region owner can draw god power. So you need to set that to false. It's set to true by default. You need to, it's already false. So parcel owner is god equals true. You need to make that false so that people that own a parcel can't claim God powers. Because you don't want that. That would be really bad. So those need to be set like that. Moving on. Let's check the time.